Hello and welcome to How Would You Rate Your Pain? We will be exploring life, loss, love, and the power of resilience. I am Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait to go on this journey with you. Hello and welcome to another episode of How Would You Rate Your Pain? I'm Dr. Tiffany Bartell, your host, and I'm here with my new friend, Noah Perales. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm so excited to talk about the work that you do. It's so innovative and creative. But before we get into that, maybe just tell listeners a little bit about you. You're here in Chattanooga with me. How long have you been here? Yeah. You know, just a little bit of your story.
Yeah, so I've been in Chattanooga for about a year and a half now. I moved there from Nashville, and I grew up in San Antonio. Okay. I currently work at Siskin Children's Institute as an occupational therapy assistant, which is a separate role from, what I'm here to talk about today, but definitely interrelated.
Yeah.
And I love skateboarding. That's my favorite regulation activity.
Okay.
That and making music. So big skateboarder, love yoga. Love tacos. That's my favorite food, breakfast tacos.
Okay.
So,
we could talk about tacos quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a spin-off.
For the next episode. So do you do, I don't know much about skateboards, but I've had a lot of clients that do it. And so are you on a regular board or a longboard?
That's a great question. It's a regular board, regular skateboard.
So any clients that are listening, I have been paying attention. I know a lot about D&D, reality TV, fantasy fiction, and skateboards. That's the lore that I have gleaned from being a therapist. They teach me too. Yeah. Okay, so what did you say?
Cool.
Regular or long?
Regular skateboard.
Regular skateboard. How long have you been doing that?
I think for like 6 years. 7 years like that, yeah.
Now, is Chattanooga a skateboard-friendly area? We have a fair bit of sidewalks and things.
Somewhat. I have heard mixed reviews, but we are getting a new skate park at some point, and I've seen the plans for that, and it looks really, really cool, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we know your hobbies and what kind of skateboard you do.
Very important. Yeah.
What else?
So I moved here about a year and a half ago. And that whole transition it's kind of related to what I ended up doing with Regulation Beats, but that was brought on. I had recently kind of changed my job and moved from the role of occupational therapy assistant. I was kind of in this temporary in-between spot, and then I got broken up with, and it was with somebody that I was living with too. So in the span of a month, I had a relationship change, I had to change jobs, and that ended up leading me to change locations altogether. So just this big life change, and ended up in Chattanooga. Shortly before that, I had graduated from a music production program at Remington College in Nashville. And so throughout this whole process, I was making music and making songs just for my personal enjoyment. So once I got to Siskin Children's Institute, I started thinking to myself, I could do this with my kids and make it therapeutic. And then I would get to make music at work. That sounds awesome. And so I brought some of the equipment in. I have a laptop and just this little keyboard controller that hooks up to the laptop, and it's really programmable. And I started making songs with them about their emotional states. And through those experiences, I realized that, if I structure this with different prompts and leading questions and different focuses, then I could target a lot of really good emotional regulation skills. So
I love that.
It just kind of snowballed into the 25 activity program that it is today.
Wow. So can you tell me a little bit more about your own relationship with music? Because, I'm guessing that it's served you, I mean, it sounds like you have a lot of fun doing what you do,
absolutely.
And you have formal training in it, and then also your own experience. But, this idea of using music to help with emotional regulation and to serve the population that you work with. I'm curious, what has music been to you?
Yeah. It's funny thinking about that and just kind of looking back, especially with where I'm at now, at all the little bits and pieces and hints of, experiences where I was like, oh, that was kind of a reflection of what I'm doing today. But I was always the type of person, as were my siblings, we were listening to music all the time, whether it was like in the shower, in the car, doing homework, out exercising, always having music on. And so it was constantly, ingrained into my life, and I was very intuitive to be drawn to it. I had always like an inkling of making music. I did a little bit in middle school where I played the viola in orchestra for like 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, that's not actually a little bit. I remember when I first met you and you're like, I said, oh, did you play an instrument? You're like, not really, just a little orchestra. I mean, viola's not the easiest instrument, and it's on a totally different clef. And 2 years is not insubstantial. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
No, we are going to honor your viola. Period.
Yeah, it did help me out, and I definitely pull on that experience now. So so I was always listening to music, and I would even do kind of interesting things like when I found a good song, as soon as I knew that I liked it and I was really excited for it, I would save it, and I wouldn't listen to it until there was this like exciting point in my life, or until I got to do something really cool. And then I would play it again, because I just really liked, harvesting the novelty of that experience and getting to pair it with something that I love to do.
Treat.
Yeah. And I definitely picked up on, obviously the more you listen to things, or the more that you do anything, the less impact it kind of has on you over time, at least from, that first initial experience. It definitely changes and develops. But even things like that, I was pretty like gravitating or pretty drawn to. So,
so what kind of music were you into when you were, young and, just around your house, working out, doing all the things?
Definitely some rap music.
Yes.
And electronic music.
Now, what kind of rap? Because I'm quite a bit older than you, and I was trying to explain to my oldest child, like, what the rap scene was like when I was growing up was like, East Coast versus West Coast. It was like, I feel like it's evolved quite a bit. Everybody was gasping when, Eminem was coming out with music. Like, I'm really old. I'm a dinosaur. And so what kind of music were you loving?
Eminem was the first one that came to mind as far as
That's so
like
full of feelings.
That's one of the earliest ones. Earliest like artists that I listened to. I'm trying to think. Definitely 50 Cent was in there too.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And then some Dr. Dre too, just along those same lines.
Like a classic.
There.
Yeah.
And then like Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, for some of the newer artists. But,
So you mentioned that like music was something that like you paired with like positive experiences or, really good feelings. Like, what did music serve you in lower times as well?
Absolutely. I mean, just constantly. I think that goes along with it just being an intuitive experience. Just popping music on to let it kind of heal you, even when you didn't really know what was happening. I was a big runner when I was younger too, and I remember, just going on long runs, and that was another point where I would just do music the entire time, and you just get those alignments where you're going through something and you're in some sort of activity, and then you hear the right song, and then things just kind of click, or you just feel a little bit more connected with it. And those memories just kind of stick with you. So
I almost feel like in those times where if you can pair like vigorous movement where you kind of aren't fully present with everything that's happening, you get that like nice flow that we all that run are high. And if you pair it with music, you can get lost in. It's almost like hardwiring into centers of your brain. It just feels like you don't have to work so hard to get there.
Yeah, I think that touches on a lot of good and really cool aspects of, sensory processing and emotion processing. Having or being somebody who likes to make music, and then also being someone who studies neurology and emotional regulation. That's just such a cool relationship between how sound is processed when you're doing different things and when your brain is in different states and different activities. So
I love that. And we're going to circle back to that because I'm so curious about those links. And so, what led you to get into OT and to work with children?
Yeah.
Because, you could have done anything with your life. And so why that?
Yeah. So I had a friend who had a little brother who had sensory processing disorder, or has sensory processing disorder. And I learned about occupational therapy through him. So I think he was maybe 5 at the time. I saw him, you know, struggle with things like wearing different clothing, or like wearing clothing that wasn't matching, or I think his big thing was like wearing pajamas. He really enjoyed that. And so I got to see him kind of address those challenges and the stressors and anxieties that came from that by doing things like climbing rock walls. And I remember thinking, like, that is so cool that you're affecting his brain by like doing this fun activity. And that connection was so abstract to me when I first learned about it. And that was around the time, you know, I was like entering college, so trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was never the type of person who could sit still for long periods of time. So it had to be like movement based. And that is definitely holds true for occupational therapy, always up, you know, transferring some in, playing games, things like that. And then there was a program at the school that I was near at the time, and just started diving into it. And the more that I learned about it, the more I got sucked in, and I was like, this is some of the most important stuff that you could be learning about. This is how we function at baseline, and this is the root of doing anything that you want. That is so incredibly cool.
I love that. Yeah. So when one of my children was really young, they had sensory issues, and we didn't realize it. We just, you know, so much of it is normalized, especially, you know, very verbal. Both the kids talked early, all their walking was on track and everything, but it was the clothing thing and teeth brushing, and couldn't put lotion on them, and couldn't brush hair without it being like really like you know, traumatic sounding, at least. And the neighbor's child was a little bit older, and he couldn't speak, like he couldn't talk at all, and they had taken him to get evaluated, and it was a sensory processing issue. He was just overwhelmed all the time. And so so the way that it was explained to us, which I'm probably not doing it right because my kids are like 17 and 20 now, so it's been a minute, but was that like he just was so overwhelmed by his environment, so sensitive to all the sounds, and very tactile, like, you know, overstimulated, all those things, that like he wasn't even like thinking about learning language or doing that. And so so they had put him into therapy, and my neighbor and I were talking, and she's like, you know, I really think, you know, your child has some of the same things. I wonder if they would benefit. And that's was kind of our journey. And we spent about 6 months working on it. And oh man, it just, the neighbor's kids started talking within like, I don't know, like a month or two. And it was crazy, you know, and you know, just such a treat to hear all the thoughts that had been in his mind that we had only been guessing at. And he was so relaxed. And that's what I saw in our child as well, is like just so relaxed and so much more at ease and willing to be like adventurous, and, you know, and a little bit more of a handful because they were so like curious about the world now.
Yeah, absolutely.
but, you know, I think that like, I think we don't realize, you know, there's so many adults that grow up with that not getting caught, and then, you know, life is really difficult. And I've seen some of them as clients, and so the work you're doing with children is just, you know, you're just kind of opening up their world to them. I think that's quite wonderful.
That's a cool way of looking at it. And I think you touch on a lot of really good points and concepts when it comes to emotional regulation in that story. Communication being a huge one. That's obviously a very big emotional regulation skill. You know, if you can't articulate what's going on with you, nor communicate that to other people, that's going to be a huge barrier as far as facilitating some sort of regulation strategy. And in times of dysregulation and high levels of stress, your communication centers are like one of the first things that start to go. So that can be a huge barrier when you have something like sensory processing disorder, where the typical environments that other people aren't affected by are constantly affecting you and pushing you up to that threshold. That's going to be a huge challenge to tackle, and then a huge puzzle to solve too, because you know, something else that you're highlighting too is just the difference between, you know, like function and optimization. So, you know, maybe this kid could get through the day and do enough things that they could maybe get their homework done or their chores done. They could get their food and drink and all of that. And so they're functioning throughout the day, but not anywhere near like optimal levels. So that's almost like going to perpetuate the longevity of them getting treatment and addressing these things. And that's how so many of us live all the time. You know, if we were to look back at our weeks and, you know, see what percentage of this was enjoyable or pleasurable or optimized versus, you know, the opposite of that, then we might notice like, oh, we're constantly dysregulated and we're constantly not functioning at our best. And there's a lot more that we could be paying attention to improve our lives.
Yeah, because I think, you know, especially as Americans, I think there's that like temptation to just kind of push and push and push. And like you're saying, like if you can do enough, then, you know, that's acceptable. And, you know, in my practice, I see so many people who have lived with lifelong anxiety or, you know, chronic depression, and it became normal to them. Yeah. And then their level of functioning and, you know, quality of life became normal to everyone around them. And so I think it can be really helpful to have these kind of conversations saying, you know, why can't our children thrive, and why can't they feel good in their bodies and feel confident in the world? And, you know, why wouldn't we be, you know, striving for optimization?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it comes to kids, you know, promoting autonomy and building the skill of autonomy is a very unique puzzle to navigate. You know, as parents, you have to support your kid and do a lot of things for your kid so that they can grow. But at the same time, you have to, you know, let go and let them do their own things and make their own decisions and have their own preferences so that they can understand and establish these boundaries and understand, like, I don't like the way I feel and I need to do something about it. It's not, I don't like the way I feel and nobody's telling me to change it, so I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah, I really like that because, you know, it's not enough to just like name that there's a problem or recognize that you're unhappy or uncomfortable. Yeah. We can do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so set the stage a little bit for the work that you do. What do we need to understand about sound and the developing brain and emotional regulation, you know, in order to kind of like really like appreciate the work that you're doing with your method?
Yeah. Big question. So many things come to mind.
Go.
Just tell me everything.
Just tell me all the things you've learned in your whole life.
Cool. I think the best way to do this is maybe walk through what a session looks like and the things that we do. So again, there's 25 activities in the program. This consists of things like making entire songs, recording audio, analyzing sounds and songs, writing lyrics, and collaborating with other people. And you do that in a variety of different ways. The one that sort of started all of this and was the origin activity, I guess, was a song production activity about your current emotional state. So in that, you start by filling out this worksheet where you look at your physiology and you do a little bit of mindfulness work. And
so like body scans or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I think it's, you look at your heartbeat, you know, how fast is it going? Is it strong? Is it soft? You look at your breathing, again, fast, medium, slow. Is it shallow or deep? You do that for like muscle tension. And then you also look at your psychology. And are my thoughts moving fast, medium, or slow? Are they calming? Are they stressful? Are they easygoing or distracting? You fill all that out, and then you answer some questions about emotion labels. So you pick 3 emotions, or I like to call them emotion labels, to describe your current emotional state. And from that set of questions, you convert all of those into musical components. So,
I love that.
Yeah, so I have like a little chart and stuff that kind of helps guide it. And of course, I'm there doing this with you. And this is where a lot of the specialized music production skills kind of take over and supplement, you know, some of the things that we'll need to get that done.
So you have like things that they can kind of point to, like things that they can or not pre-selected, but like options.
Absolutely, yeah. So the program is designed to be as inclusive as possible, and as an occupational therapy assistant, my specialty is kind of activity analysis. So who is the person I'm working with? What are their skills? What are their challenges? What are they trying to do? What supports do we have? And how do we get this done so that they can be the most independent as possible? And that is the mindset that, and I think the unique value that comes with this as far as approaching it from an occupational therapy standpoint, because like you're saying, there are visuals, there are presets, there's me there to guide things, even if it's like physical movement. And all of those are going to be utilized, but in the least restrictive way possible. So the goal is you do the absolute most that you can do, because that's going to give us the best reflection of your emotional state. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And although I'm like referring to this stuff as songs, it's in this activity, at least, a lot of times it's a transcription. It's an audio transcription of your emotional state. And it's kind of like a song. It's kind of like a beat, but you're really supposed to see and feel that person and what's going on with them in that time through that little project that they create. So
I love that.
Yeah. So it's really, really cool.
And so I would imagine that this would work with, clients that are nonverbal or have, some, communication, barriers that they might be facing. You have so many different ways of helping them to access that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's where the occupational therapy background comes in handy, because I have experience with a lot of people like that. And again, there's visuals, and not only, the visuals and the alternative means of communicating, but just the perception that you have to understand language in a way that is going to help convey someone's ideas when they are not necessarily able to convey them themselves. So, people who have autism, that's a great example, because although that's a whole spectrum of behaviors and presentations, some of those individuals have alternative ways of communicating, and it's incredibly fun to decode their specific language of what they're talking about and decode it to translate crazy ideas like emotions. And so some of the inclusivity comes from me just being able to facilitate that as a therapy practitioner.
Yeah, I love that. So like you're learning them, which is just a wonderfully empowering experience for anyone to have somebody totally 100% attuned to them, trying to figure out, with them what they're feeling and thinking, and then helping them to express it in a way that they can share. That's quite lovely. So you mentioned people who have autism. What other demographics do you work with? And, what is this program geared to help with?
Absolutely. So this program is pretty much for anybody and everybody. Again, the idea is to really harp on that inclusive aspect of it. So the youngest person I've done it with was 1.5 years, and they were working on just basic imitation attention skills, and we were using the equipment to facilitate that, and using sensory processing strategies. So there's a lot of lights and dials and stuff on the equipment, so it's kind of naturally doing that. But the programmability of the tools adds to that, because for this client, I put the Bluey soundtrack on the different pads, and so whenever you would press it, and only when you would press it, it would play that really familiar sound that's already kind of entrained in their brain to be something to look towards. So it's tapping into those naturally engaging cognitive associations to build what are the foundations of emotion regulation skills. So again, going back to the communication piece, if you're not able to attend to other people or interact with other people or follow someone else's instructions, or maybe even your own instructions when it comes to impulse control, then it's going to be really hard to regulate your emotions. And then going up the lifespan, the oldest person that I did this with has been my grandma, who I think was 92.
Wow.
And for her,
how fun.
So she's kind of aging out right now and facing all of the challenges that come with that cognitive decline. And so for her, it was interestingly kind of similar to the younger kiddo, where we were working on some just executive function things, so following directions, attending to a task, and there's also a component of relaxation and, more typical emotional regulation things. She experiences a lot of anxiety that is associated with, her confusion, and which is, makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And so having just a pleasant sound and having control to access that pleasant sound is, very helpful for her. And it's cool to get to do that.
That's
as well.
so special to be able to like sit with her in that space. I love that. Okay, so we're going to pause and take a quick break for a sponsor, and then we'll come back and talk more about emotional regulation.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back from our short break. And so you've used the words emotional regulation quite a few times. And I'm wondering if that might be something that might be good to break down for our listeners, because we have a wide spectrum of people that might be listening right now. What do you mean when you talk about emotional regulation?
Yeah, so we'll just go with the definitions. So an emotion is a physiological energy and behavioral state that you experience and motivates you to take some sort of action.
Okay.
And regulation, so a regulated emotional state is one where your emotional and energy state is optimized or apt for the current occupation, and an occupation meaning just some sort of activity.
Okay.
And then a dysregulated emotional state or dysregulation would be your energy emotion state not being, would be maladapted for the current occupation. So it's not in line with the needs and demands of the current situation.
Yeah, so like if I'm a parent and I have a small child who's, being, naughty or needs some kind of corrective thing, if I'm emotionally dysregulated and I'm angry, that's not the state that I need to be in to do the behavior that would help my child and like get us through this moment, or, if we're talking to somebody and we're really upset and we can't like talk civilly and like kindly work it through together or even think clearly,
right,
that would be dysregulated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so specific too. And it's like, you can break it down in so many different categories and facets. And that's what I love, because I'm a very technical person.
You're very analytical.
Yeah, very analytical and technical. So with this, it's just like, free game. I get to break it down as much as I can. So like for the example of you being angry with your kids, maybe the emotion angry is appropriate for the situation. And that would be in terms like a regulated emotion. But maybe let's say we are angry. That's okay because kids did something unsafe.
A boundary was crossed.
Yeah, that's appropriate. For that current situation, that may be inclusive of a regulated emotional state. But if you throw in the mix of like a high energy anger, then that formula looks a little bit different, and that may be where you get to that dysregulation, because if you have those angry feelings and thoughts but you have so much energy built up that it may lead you to approach the situation in a way that's not the most adaptive. And it's not going to help you achieve your end goal. But emotion or regulated and dysregulated states, they can feel pleasant or unpleasant in a mixed match of both. So it's very different than feeling good and feeling bad.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, the work that you're doing, you're helping, it sounds like, you're helping people that you're serving to be able to identify their emotional state and then be able to manage the energy that's associated with the emotion that they're feeling. Or am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That's a component. Again, like you can get real technical, real specific, but that's absolutely right.
Okay.
The overall, kind of concept is, let's understand, what emotions are, how they kind of develop, and then let's identify our own patterns of those emotional experiences and, what factors in me cause certain feelings and lead to certain behaviors, which lead to certain outcomes. And how can I understand and manage and navigate that whole complex system to improve my life and to understand myself and to have more positive affect and to make better decisions.
Yeah, and I think, we're just at such a time where people are so open to these conversations. And you think about the, the popularity of Inside Out and Inside Out 2, and this idea of I think people really want to understand what's happening inside of them and, be able to look at it mindfully as opposed to acting out of it or feeling like you're at the mercy of whatever, gets triggered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in presenting this idea to different people and just talking about it, it seems to have an energy and momentum of its own. So I definitely feel like the culture is ready for something like this, and to really embrace it and maximize it, because people really resonate with the idea, which is cool.
Yeah, I mentioned this before on the podcast, but I was listening to some podcast that were interviewing one of the happiness researchers, and they were talking about, we know that happiness, not as a feeling, but as a measurable, affect, it tends in the lifespan to be a U, where you were pretty happy in childhood, hopefully, and then kind of those golden years, empty nester, we have life satisfaction, happiness, peak. And what they were saying was that it's really alarming because, especially in America, one side of the U is flattening. Our children are really unhappy.
Yeah.
And I just can't, really get that out of my mind as I think about, society. Our children are our most precious treasure. And if we do nothing else in the world but just make the world a good place for them, and them having a good quality of life in it. And so I think, the work that you're doing with children to kind of, open up, their ability to communicate and their ability to regulate, I think that's quite lovely. So what else do people need to know about the work that you do? How can they access these services for themselves or someone they love? And I guess the closing question would be what's your vision for Regulation Beats?
My vision?
Yeah.
So I am currently on a few social media platforms. I have a Facebook page under Regulation Beats. My Instagram tag is Regulation Beats, and then I'm also on LinkedIn under Noah Perales, or I think it pops up if you look at Regulation Beats. And then my phone number is 210-781-1685.
Oh my goodness. Do you want everyone to have your phone number?
Yeah, that's the one I use for work and stuff.
Okay.
So, yeah. Just call me if you need services.
I was like, we can edit that out, but he's not. He's really accessible.
Throwing in all the plugs here.
I love it.
Yeah, and then by email too. So it's all lowercase, noah.perales, Perales, @regulationbeats.net. So you can reach me through any of those medium. I'm constantly checking all that stuff, so it should be a short response.
Very responsive.
Yeah.
I always hear from you really quickly.
Yeah.
So if somebody was interested, they could reach out to you and just talk about what they or the person that they care about is experiencing. And would it be a consultant session to see if it's a good fit, and then schedule programming, or how does this work?
Yeah, absolutely. Just reaching out kind of with your main curiosity or main concern. We can definitely just go from there. But I'm happy to do consultations and just some sort of call where we talk about what's going on. I can send over resources, things like that, do some education. But direct sessions are really great as well. I'm currently just doing home-based sessions. So, if you're local to the Chattanooga area or want to try something out virtual, it's typically a 1-hour session is pretty ideal.
Yeah.
And again, there's 25 different activities, lots of different approaches we can take. So
is it a
depending on what you
series
need.
of sessions, or is it usually a standalone?
It can be either. Typically, these things take a while to kind of really set it and have an impact. However, with the consultations, it's any piece of information, could be helpful. So sometimes that's all it takes, or the right, worksheet or activity for you to do on your own. So it's really just kind of whatever the person needs and whatever the individual needs.
I love that. Okay, vision time.
Vision time.
Where do you want to go?
So lots of different things been floating around my head recently.
Yeah.
One of them, I would love to conduct some research on the program and get some quantitative, concrete data about the efficacy of this. So, if anybody is in that field, I'm more of a clinician. And although I've done a good bit of research to develop this and make sure that it's evidence-based, that, developing and running and writing a research study is not my forte. That's so I would definitely have to go back to school for that.
So dissertation students?
Yes.
He's like setting you up.
You have my phone number.
Yeah. Now you really have his phone number.
So conducting some sort of research. I would love to do some sort of,
because right now you have more qualitative, data
Correct.
that you've been collecting through working and seeing the effects of it.
And I have been running this as an occupational therapy intervention, which it's very much under the scope of. However, to be able to do it consistently in a more structured basis would be great, because the kiddos that I see at Siskin, they have other goals that they need to work on, and I have to be,
attentive to that.
Attentive to that, and just ethical with how I proceed in that role. So it would be great to do that. And I guess that segues into like contracting opportunities. So if there's anybody who wants an individual session, I'm doing those right now, and those are awesome to have. In addition to that, contracting with some bigger healthcare organizations would be incredibly helpful to have, just a higher volume and greater consistency of clientele to run a research study through, or to just see the outcomes of, and get more practice and experience with this tool and this program. And then any sort of one-off interesting collaboration. I recently was talking with somebody in California who has a business for this program that they're developing that analyzes musical keys into like emotional states. So their approach was like, I improvise with my band a lot on stage, so I want to have something that will create visuals that match the feel of what we're playing when we don't know what we're going to play.
Yeah.
And I've talked with him a couple times, and they don't have like a huge therapy initiative with it, although that they're open to that. That's just not their forte. So I'm really hoping to get to partner with them and kind of build out that programming alongside or in collaboration with what I'm doing.
That sounds like a very cool concert.
Right?
That'd be a very cool concert. Yeah.
But any sort of, music technology, healthcare technology, sort of collaboration to help develop the field or maximize the good that could come from this, I'm very interested in. So
I love that. Yeah, that's a big vision and quite doable, based on what you're already doing. Okay, so I lied. I think the closing thing I'd love to hear from you is, what's your favorite story from the people that you've worked with, as much as you can share?
My favorite story from people that I worked with.
Or experience with doing this.
So there's this worksheet called the Sonic Cue. And how this goes is, you pick a song, or you can make a song, we're using another program worksheet, about a regulated emotional state. So again, we're thinking about something that we're trying to do, and what an optimized emotional, energy, behavioral complex looks like for that. We're going to make a song, or we're going to find a song about it, and then we are going to pair that song with a regulation strategy. So say my song is like Free by Zach Brown. That's very like chill.
Yeah.
So it's Free by Zach Brown, and my regulation strategy is taking deep breaths. So anytime, we're going to start by doing some like cognitive conditioning work for it. So anytime that I'm in the state that I'm trying to contrive with this song or with this tool, I'm going to play it. So if I'm feeling really good that day, I'm really relaxed, I'm really calm, I'm like, oh, let me listen to my song. And then as soon as I hear the song, I'm going to practice taking deep breaths. So that's kind of the first stage.
I love it.
You want to do that a bunch of times. Repetition is huge when it comes to this one. And so you're going to do that a bunch of times. And then once you kind of feel like you've been exercising that well, you're going to try it out in a more dysregulated state. And the idea is that you are creating a sonic cue, a sound-based cue, for not only your behavior to change by engaging in the regulation strategy, but if you can do it enough times in the right context like physiologically, then it's intended to evoke, a biological response as well. So it's going to help maybe slow your heart rate or slow your breathing or relax your muscle tension. And all of these things are kind of ingredients for an emotional state. And then it'll just facilitate that transition into that state. And so I had a kid, and this was when I was like kind of came up with the idea. I was like, this would be really cool. I got to try this out. And so I started running it with a kid, and they came back one session and they're like it worked. Like we put the song on, he would do his deep breaths or something, and then it would like help him transition down. And then there was even times where he would do it and he would say like, oh, I don't want to take my deep breaths or something. But then after a little bit of just leaving it on and like allowing him to be oppositional, it still had a positive effect. And it was so cool. It was so cool to hear about that, because that's kind of like, I don't know, a tricky thing to finesse, and I felt like I was reaching a little bit with that process. But, I'm assuming and hoping that the physiological, biological change came with that and he started to feel more calm. But at the least, it proved to me that this is a good cue to identify dysregulation. Yeah. Because the parents didn't have to say anything. They just put the song on, and the kid, whether he was, complying or not, noticed like this is the time to take deep breaths. And so doing that, over time with a variety of different things is just going to help map in a multisensory way, like all of these points where you would need to take action and create all these different tools to help you address those. And just thought it was super cool.
That is so cool. And I think I love what it did for you in showing what can be done with your program. But I'm just thinking, those parents, you gave them hope that, there are resources their child can access, because I'm assuming they were coming because things are difficult. Yeah. And they needed help. And then, what a lovely thing for someone so young to feel the power that they can have in themselves. Because I think sometimes, especially if we're really significantly dysregulated, people feel so powerless and helpless. And so then to be able to see, I can install, I can manually override what's naturally, occurring and create different, responses and initial responses. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think carryover is a huge focus of mine. And although I love treating people and seeing people, the goal is that you do this on your own and that you don't have to engage with that forever. And so, creating tools that I can send off with the individuals is really great. And that's what I love about the whole, digital music production stuff. And, going back to the activity I was explaining earlier about song production, we didn't get through the end of that one, but at the end you get to take the song home, and it's just, I airdrop it to you or email it, and then they have it as a tool to show people and to use, maybe to reflect on their experiences. And I mean, there's just a lot of evidence how art and creation is huge when it comes to, healing and therapy. And so they just get a little bit of that as well, which is really cool.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here with me,
definitely.
Noah.
Thank you for having me.
So it's Noah, Regulation Beats, Instagram, Facebook. The whole world has his phone number now. You may want to silence that one at night when you're sleeping. But check out his work. Thank you so much for listening today. If, as you're listening, you're hearing a story of your own coming up, just want to encourage you to find those spaces where your story can be heard. Be gentle with yourself, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to How Would You Rate Your Pain? Please subscribe on your favorite listening platform so you never miss an episode. And if this show made you think of someone, please share it with them to help us grow. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Bartell. You can find me on Instagram at the_happy_therapist_. This show is not intended as medical advice and should not take the place of therapy or other mental health services. Please consult with your doctor or mental health provider about your own health. You deserve all the support. How Would You Rate Your Pain is co-produced by Wavelength Studios and Chattanooga Podcast Studios and is part of the Podnuga Network. Graphic design provided by Josh Wilhelm at JW Creates and music by Michael Crosa. I'm Dr. Tiffany Bartell. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time right here on How Would You Rate Your Pain?